Welcome to Fabric Arts Exclusive. So for this tutorial, we're going to be needing the following items: our marker pen, our measuring tape, pattern master, ruler, and of course our pattern paper. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do now is to fold our pattern paper into two. The pattern paper is going to be on a fold of two. And how do you know how to fold, or what amount of pattern paper to fold? Or even if it's a fabric, how do you know the amount of fabric to fold? Is that, this is my measurement. The largest circumference in your measurement is what you will use. For this measurement I'm using, the largest circumference here is 34, which is the blouse hip, okay? So what you do is that you divide the blouse hip by 4 and add about 5 inches to it. Now, this is 34 inches. So if I divide 34 by 4, it gives me 8.5. And I now added extra 5 inches allowance. Although I have a bit more than that here, but that's how you know how to fold your fabric or your pattern paper. Okay, so the next thing we're going to do now is to create our border line. Now, this border line is also going to serve as the allowance with which we are going to turn our fabric with the lining when we're sewing it. So I'm going to use an allowance of a little below half an inch. I'm just going to do 1 bar, short of half an inch, okay? So instead of using the complete half inch, I'm just going to reduce it by 1 bar. So and I'm going to mark it in like maybe 3 different points, like that. This is to enable me to rule out, my line, okay? So when I'm done with that, I'm going to rule a horizontal line across all the points, like so. So this is what I've done now. The horizontal line is across all the points. Then I'm going to go ahead and measure all my vertical measurements, okay? So the first thing I'm going to measure now will be my bust point. Now, because this is an off-shoulder blouse, the neck depth that I'm working with is 5 inches. So what I'm going to do is place my measuring tape 5 inches, above my border line. This new line that I've created, which serves as my border line, I just place my 5-inch mark actually on top of that border line, okay? And then I do all my vertical measurements. So the first vertical measurement I'm marking now is my bust point. Okay, the bust point for this measurement I'm using is 8.5. So I'm going to go ahead and measure 8.5. I'm going to mark 8.5 on like maybe 3 points. Remember to place your measuring tape on the border line. On the border line, that's new line that we just drew on the pattern paper. So I'm going to rule my line across. I'm going to rule a horizontal line across. The next thing I'm going to measure now is going to be the shoulder to under bust measurement. The same thing I repeated in step 1. I place my 5-inch mark on the border line, and then I measure down my shoulder to under bust. The shoulder to under bust for this particular measurement is 12 inches. So, like I did previously, I mark out the 12 inches in about 3 places, so that I can rule my horizontal line across. Okay, so that is the shoulder to under bust measurement. All right. Next is the waistline measurements. I'm going to measure my waistline measurements. That's what some people call half length. The waistline measurement here is 15.5. The waistline measurement here is 15.5, so I'll go ahead and mark my points like so. 15.5, I mark my points like so, and then I rule a horizontal line across all points. So I have it this way. Now finally, my desired blouse length. Okay, so the desired blouse length for this blouse, for this particular blouse, the blouse length is 24 inches. So I place my 5-inch mark on my borderline. Okay, and then I mark 24 inches. I'm going to add half an inch for sewing allowance, so I'm actually going to mark 24.5 inches. So I mark my 24.5 inches all the way, and then I rule a horizontal line across all points. I rule a horizontal line across all the points. Okay, so like so. Next, we mark all the points. I'm going to turn it this way so I can mark. We have our bust point, we have our shoulder to under bust, we have our waistline, and of course the blouse length. Okay, so that has been labeled. The next thing we're going to do is mark out our bust span. The bust span I'm using for this blouse is 7. Okay, now I divide 7 by 2, it gives me 3.5, and I add half an inch allowance, which makes it 4. So on all the points, I mark out my 4-inch bust span. I mark them on all those horizontal lines that I have across my pattern paper. On all the points, I mark out my 4-inch. Then I rule a vertical line across all the points to give me my bust span line. Okay, so this line is called my bust span line. The next thing is I go to my shoulder to under bust. The line for my shoulder to under bust, that point of my shoulder to under bust. Then I mark 1 inch on each side of the bust span line. 1 inch here, 1 inch here. And I go to my waistline, I do the same thing, 1 inch on each side of the bust span line. Now to the hemline or to the blouse length area, 1 inch on each side of the bust span line. Then I rule a vertical line across all points, like so. A vertical line across all points, like so, and like this. Next thing is we take our pattern master, and from the bust point area, I'm going to draw a curve with my pattern master to connect with the shoulder to under bust. Okay, please watch what I'm doing closely. It's quite simple if you watch closely. So what I'm doing is from my bust point now, I'm connecting with a curve to my shoulder to under bust. I'm flipping the pattern master the other way, and I'm doing the same thing, connecting from the bust point to the shoulder to under bust. So it gives us a curve like this. The next thing we're going to do is draw out the dart for the upper part, that's for the neck area. Now the bust span measurement that we used here is 4. Was actually 3.5. 7 we divided it by 2 gave us 3.5, and then we added half an inch sewing allowance, which made it 4. So now that 4, I'm going to take that 4 and add 1 more inch to it, which is going to give me 5. My bust span allowance plus 1 inch added to it will give me 5. I'm measuring that 5 here. So this is standard for all measurements, for all sizes, for everybody. All you need to do is just add 1 inch to whatever bust span you have here, and that will be the basis for your dart. That will be where your dart will start, okay? So from that mark, that 5-inch mark now, I'm going to draw, I hope you can see this, let me move closer. I'm going to draw a slanted line from that mark to meet my bust point, okay? Now on that part, on that line that I just drew now, I'm going to measure 1/2 inch on both sides. 1/2 inch this way and 1/2 inch this way. 1/2 inch on both sides. Then I draw a slanted line also to go and connect the bust point. To connect the bust point, like so. So this is what we have. Our dart is ready. The next thing we're going to do now is to measure our neck width. Okay? Now the neck width I'm using for this particular top or blouse, this off-shoulder blouse, is 5. So I'm going to have to mark out 5 here on the borderline for my neck width. But I also have to take into consideration these darts, this 1-inch dart that I have made here, because we're going to cut it out. So we need to replace it. Therefore, instead of 5 for my neck width, I'm going to measure out 6 inches for my neck width. So I have 6 inches this way. The next thing I'm going to do is to sew this dart. When I cut it out, I'm going to need 1/2 inch on both sides, on the center front and on the side front. I'm going to need 1/2 inch to join the dart. I'm going to put that 1/2 inch now, so plus 1/2 inch. Okay? So the next thing I'm going to do now is that I'm going to measure another 1 inch for sewing allowance. So I'm doing 1 inch for sewing allowance. Let me go over that again. The neck width I want is 5 inches, but because I have to replace the 1 inch dart, I'm adding 1 to my 5 inches to make it 6. So I'm marking 6 for my neck width instead of 5. I need 1/2 inch sewing allowance on both sides, on the center front and the center side, 1/2 inch to join the darts. So making 1, I've added that 1 here, and another 1 for sewing allowance. Now, next step for me to do now is to mark out my armhole depth. The armhole depth I'm working with is 7 inches. So just like I've been taking all my other vertical measurements, I'm going to put my 5-inch mark, on my borderline at the point of this sewing allowance that I just marked now. I'll put it like that, on the borderline, at the point of that sewing allowance I just marked now. And I'm just going to come down till I get to 7. I'm going to mark down 7, okay? 5 inch up, 2 inches down, that makes it 7. Okay, so let me just mark it, on a few more points so that I can do a line across. Okay, so we have that. Okay, I hope I'm not. So we have that. The next thing we're going to do now is to measure out the bust. The bust measurement. The bust measurements for this top piece, for this blouse, is 33 inches. Okay. So we're going to do 33 inches divided by 4. It gives me 8.5. Okay. So I'm marking 8.5 at this point now. Now on that 8.5 line, if you notice, the dart cuts across this line also. So I'm going to measure what I have. I'm not going to rule a line just across this dart, a short line, a short horizontal line. Then I'm going to go back and measure what I have there. I have 1/2 inch at this point of the dart. I need to replace it so that when I cut it out, it's not going to make my bust measurement shorter. So that's 1/2 inch. I'm replacing it. I'm putting 1/2 inch here. And then I'm going to add 1 inch for joining my dart. You remember I said we need 1/2 on the center front, and then 1/2 on the center front and 1/2 at the center side. Okay, so making 1 inch. I'm adding 1 inch to sew my dart. Then I'll now add 1.5 inch sewing allowance. Now I go to the shoulder to under bust. The shoulder to under bust, is on that point. I'm going to measure my round under bust. The round under bust for this particular blouse is 27 inches. When I divide 27 by 4, it gives me 6 3/4. So I'm marking 6 3/4 this way. Remember, this dart is 2 inches, 1 inch on both sides. I need to replace it. So I'm going to mark out 2 inches extra for the dart replacement. Now I need 1 inch to join the darts. I'm going to place 1 inch sewing allowance and then 1.5 inch general sewing allowance. Okay? Now I go to the waistline. The waist for this blouse is 26. 26 divided by 4 gives me 6 3/4. Okay? So I'm marking 6 3/4 at that point. I'm replacing the 2 inch darts like so. I'm adding 1 inch sewing allowance for joining the dart on both sides, and then I'm adding a general allowance for 1.5 inches. Now I'm going to the blouse length. Okay? Now on this point I'm going to be using my blouse hip measurement. The blouse hip measurement for this is 34 inches. When I divide 34 by 4, it gives me 8.5. So I mark 8.5 at that point. I replace my 2 inches dart like I've done for the previous points. I add my 1 inch for dart replacement. My 2 inches dart replacement, my 1 inch for sewing the dart, and then my 1.5 inches general sewing allowance. Okay? So the next thing I want to do now is to connect the points. So which is what I'm doing now. Connecting all the points. I'm connecting all the points like so. Using my ruler. Connecting all the points like so. So that is what I have. Now, for the armhole area, what I'm just going to do is I'm going to connect, from the allowance for the armhole depth. Yes, the armhole depth. So I'm going to connect a curve like so. Like this. That's for my armhole curve. So that's all for the front part of this dress. So the next thing we do now is for us to cut it out. Okay. So with my scissors, I'm going to cut out the pattern. Please watch closely and see the areas I'm going to cut out. Now I'm going to extend, before I forget that, this borderline, which I said earlier also serves as a sewing allowance. Let me move closer. I'm going to extend the dart lines like that. I'm going to extend the dart lines so that I'll cut from the beginning of the pattern paper. I'm extending it for the armhole depth too. Okay, so I'm going to cut now. So I'm cutting across this way. Cutting across this way. And like so. Another thing I forgot to mention is that at the edge of the blouse, I hope you can see this. At the edge of the blouse, to avoid any pointy edges, you can come up by 1 inch. Then get the middle, the measurements, between your dart and your side seam. For me, this is 8.5 from this point to, I hope you can see this, from this point to this point. From this point to this point is 8.5. So half of that will be like 4/4. I can do 4.5. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to draw a slightly curved line from that point just to meet that 1 inch, just to avoid any pointy edges, when you finish making your dress. So let's go back to cutting out this. Cutting it out now. Let me first cut out this. Cut this out, with a slightly curved area like that, so that I can cut out my dots. So I come this way, and I also cut out the dots like that. Cutting out the dots, cutting out the dots, and I'm cutting out the dots. So that is that for the front pattern. So this is what we have. You can see it. So this is what we have for our front pattern. It's ready. This is the front pattern. This is the center front, and these are the 2 side patterns. So next we're going to cut out the back pattern. Okay, so this is our pattern paper. The same thing that we did for the front pattern. We're going to measure the border line. It's just 1 bar short of 1/2 inch. So we do that, 1 bar short of 1/2 inch, just like we did for the front pattern, like so. Then we roll out our horizontal line across all points. Okay. Then the first thing you do is on the fold. This is also on a fold. The pattern paper for the back is also on the fold. Okay. So from that, from the folded part, you measure out your zipper allowance. So I'm doing it like so. I'm using a zipper allowance of 1.5 inches. So 1.5 inches. I measure it all the way down. I just mark it all the way. Okay. So I roll a vertical line across all points like so. I roll a vertical line across all points like so. The next thing I'm doing now is I'm going to measure out my blouse length. So the blouse length I'm working with is 24. I'm adding 1/2 inch sewing allowance, so that 24 is making it 24.5. So I place my 5-inch mark. That is for my neck depth for the off shoulder. I place my 5-inch mark on the borderline, and I mark my points. 24.5 this way. 24.5. Mark it out like so. Mark it out like so. Just on a few points to make rolling it easier, and then I roll out. I roll like so. Okay. Now that being done, the next thing is to measure out your bust points and your waistline. We don't need under bust for the back. So I'm doing that now with my 5-inch mark placed on my borderline. I'm measuring out the bust point. The bust point here is 8.5. So I'm marking 8.5 with my 5-inch mark on my borderline. 8.5 across the points like that. Then I'm going to remove a horizontal line across the points like so. Next, I'm going to mark out my waistline. Okay, so the waistline for this blouse is 15.5. So with my measuring tape on my borderline. I mark 15.5, like so, and then I will draw a horizontal line across all points, like so, for my waistline. Now the next thing I'm going to do now is to measure my darts, okay? Now, our bust span measurements that we use for the front area is 4 inches. So I'm going to measure 4 inches. All my allowances are going to start after this zipper allowance, okay? So I'm measuring 4 inches after the zipper allowance. So the zipper allowance is not included in your 4 inches. So 4 inches, like so. On the bust point, I'm going to measure 4 inches. However, on that bust point, I can come up by 1.5 inches. You know, just come by 1.5 inches, just to make the dart a bit longer, like so. And then I draw a vertical line across all points, like so. The next thing I'm going to do is, on my waistline, I'm going to measure out 1/2 inch for darts on both sides. 1/2 inch this way, 1/2 inch that way, and then on the borderline, like this, on the hemline, I'm going to also do 1/2 inch this way, 1/2 inch this way. Okay, so I am going to connect the points to make a straight line, a vertical line actually, like so, and then from that point I am going to connect it with the point where I measured like 1.5 inch above the bust point. So that's where I'm going to connect the darts to. Okay, remember that I measured 1.5 inches above the bust point. So here's our dart. Now for the neckline, our neckline for the front is going to be the same for the back. That's the neck width. We use a neck width of 5 inches for the front. So on the borderline, I'm going to measure out 5 inches after the zipper allowance. Please note, 5 inches like so, and I'm going to put I'm going to need 1/2 inch sewing allowance to attach the sleeve. Okay, that's already included in the 1.5 inch sewing allowance I put for the front. So 5 here plus 1/2 inch, it makes 5.5. Now at that 5.5 point, I'm going to measure down my armhole depth. The armhole depth for this blouse is 7. So I'm placing my 5 inch mark on the borderline, and I'm measuring down my 7 inch armhole depth. Okay, so I'll just measure it out in a few more points. Rule a line across for my armhole depth. So the same thing I did for the front, I'm going to mark out my bust. The bust measurement for this is 33 divided by 4, it gives me 8.5. So I'm doing 8.5 here, like so, and 1.5 inch sewing allowance, 1.5 inches sewing allowance, like so. Okay. Now for my waistline, the waist of this for this measurement is 26. So if I divide 26 by 4, it gives me 6.5. I start my measurements after the zipper allowance. So 6.5, like so. I need to replace this 1 inch dart that I have there. So I'm replacing the 1 inch dart. I need another 1 inch to sew the dart on both sides, which is what I'm replacing now. And then my 1.5 inch general sewing allowance. Okay, so I'm going to the hemline now, the end of the blouse. My blouse hip measurement here, the blouse hip measurement I have here is 34 inches. So 34 inches divided by 4 gives me 8.5. So I place my 8.5 like so, and I mark. Okay, 8.5, and I'm going to add 1 inch for the dart replacement, and then 1 inch for my sewing allowance. Okay, I discovered that this paper is short, so before I sew it, I'm going to just maybe join a bit of paper here so that I can have my 1 inch for sewing the darts. Remember, this is 8.5 here. I replaced the 1 inch darts. Okay, and then I now added the 1 inch for sewing the darts on both sides, but there is no space for me to add my 1.5 inch general sewing allowance. So what I'm going to do is that I'm going to add some paper to this place so that I can do that. Okay, so I've quickly added some paper to extend, I've added more pattern paper to extend that lower part. So let me go over it again. So at the hemline, I'm going to be measuring out my blouse hip measurement. The blouse hip measurement I'm working with here is 8.5. So I'm starting my 8.5 mark, just after my zipper allowance. The zipper allowance is not going to be inclusive. So 8.5 after the zipper allowance, I have this. Now I'm going to replace this 1 inch dart, which is my 1 inch here. Then I'm going to add 1 inch for sewing the darts on both sides, and then I will now add my 1.5 inch general sewing allowance. Okay, so I'll just use a line across this so that it can be clear. Then we mark out all our points like so. Okay, so mark that out like so, and mark this out like so. Okay, now for this part also, like we did for the front part, we're going to come up by 1 inch to avoid pointy edges. We're going to measure out whatever we have here from the dart to the seam line. Okay, for this case I have 8, so half of it is 4. So I just, from that 4 inch mark, I just draw out a curve like so, and then I come to my armhole depth line, the line for my armhole depth, and I connect the curve from the beginning point like so. Let me move this forward like so to draw my armhole curve like this. Okay, so I'm extending this just over the borderline, because that borderline serves also as my sewing allowance for sewing the lining and the fabric together. Okay, so at this point, what we need to do is just to cut out our pattern. Okay, so I'm cutting out my pattern like so, cutting out my pattern like so. Also, before I cut out the pattern, the zipper allowance, to avoid zip bulges, okay, so what we're going to do is from the waistline, which is also the half length. Now the waistline of the back is usually higher than the waistline for the front. Okay, so I'm going to come up from this zipper allowance now, that zipper allowance line. I'm coming up by 1. Okay, I'm coming up by 1. I'll just mark a few points. Okay, just for clarity, that's why I'm marking it. So I'm marking 1 like that. Okay, so what I'm doing now is that from the folded part on this 1 inch line that I just marked above my waistline. Okay, the normal waistline of the back is usually higher, like 1 inch or 1.5 inches higher than the waistline for the front. So I'm measuring 1 inch up from my original waistline, which is this short line that I just drew now. Now, on that line, I'm going to measure in 1/2 inch from the fold, which is this 1/2 inch from the fold. Okay, I'm measuring in 1/2 inch from the fold, and then I'll draw a slanted line, you know, from the beginning here to that point, like so. Next thing, I'm going to connect it to the hemline also, like so. Okay, so this is to avoid any bulge at the zipper part, and that's all. All we need to do is just cut it out, like so. Cut it out like so. Like so. So that's what we have. And then we need to cut out our darts, like so. I'm going to have to turn this a bit this way so that I can cut it. Okay, so I'm cutting out that dart in the middle. So, cutting out the darts in the middle, and voila. So, this is let me get all this off the table. Good. So this is for our back pattern. Okay. So this is what we have for the back pattern. Alright. The 2 sides. This is the dart. And then the zipper side. You can see that 1/2 inch we cut out created sort of a dart at the back. This is how the zipper fits in properly. Relax properly on the back. So we've come to the end of today's tutorial. Thank you so much for watching to the end. And if you like my tutorial, if you enjoyed this, please share, subscribe to my channel, and like. Thank you so much, and please keep your comments kind. Thank you so much for your encouragement. Have a blessed day. Bye.